Okay, so we are starting by answering this question. How to heal your inner child and become your own loving parent. So how to heal your inner child? Well, first of all, the first thing we need to do to heal our inner child is start a communication with our inner child. We need to start acknowledging that our inner child needs attention, needs healing, needs love from our adult self. So from our adult self or our conscious self. So that is the first step. Okay? It's the same with any healing. It's specifically for your inner child. But in general, if you're doing any healing, the first step is to acknowledge, to be aware that there is a wound. Okay? Now, it's slightly different when we are intentionally working with our inner child. Because for most people, for most adults today, it's really hard for them to empathize with their inner child because of their rational mind. So the rational mind wants to convince, rationalize, make things logical. And the first thing that the adult rational mind wants to convince itself is that, well, that happened too long ago. That happened many years ago. I mean, come on, that's done. That's not affecting me anymore. That happened when I was 2 or 5 or 6, or when I was a teenager. So a long time passed since I had that hurt or that pain or that disappointment or that betrayal and so on. So the adult today, the rational mind thinks that because many years passed, then that is healed. That's past. That's not affecting me anymore. I've had countless clients believe in this, and it's not the case. It doesn't matter how many years pass. If you do not acknowledge at some point, if you do not do any type of healing work with that child, that memory, that part, that situation, or that person that involved the specific hurting situation or the wound or the trauma, then that hurt and that wound is still there. It's still there. And what happens is that it crystallizes, it becomes hard in your emotional body. It becomes, hardened. It's a hard memory, meaning it gets stuck. It's stuck in time. It's stuck back then in the past because it was not processed. It was not felt. And as a child, just think of a child. As a child, you don't have the emotional capacity and the rational capacity and the maturity to process extreme emotion or overwhelming emotions. And that is what happened when we were kids, that everything was overwhelming. Every single thing was overwhelming, emotional. Now, why it became, in many cases, they were negative emotional overwhelm. In many cases was negative and became a wound and became a hurt and became a trauma because we have been born in a wounded world. We have been born in a traumatized world. So this is something that we need to understand and accept as a human collective, as humans in this earth. We all need to come to that realization. And the faster you realize that, the easier your life is going to be. Because the more denial you make out of that, the least you're going to heal, the least you're going to make changes or positive changes, and the least you're going to change those insecurities that are rooted in childhood. So just to name some of the insecurities or some of the feelings that are very rooted in childhood for everybody is those sensations or those feelings or those emotions, however you want to call it, of abandonment, rejection, feeling not good enough, feeling left out or ignored. Those are some things, some of the deep, wounded, deep feelings of adults today. Even if they are adults, they feel these things. So especially in relationships, those things are gonna come out. Feeling lonely, all that is rooted in childhood. All the insecurities that you might feel are rooted in childhood. Because your security started building when you were a child. So if you were not made feel, if your caregivers did not make you feel completely secure and protected, then that feeling of not being secure and protected is there. And then you keep growing up with those feelings, that lack of security and lack of protection inside yourself, because you did not feel enough security or enough protection. Now, I'm not talking about, this is another point that a lot of people think that is, oh, that's just, for people who grew up with our parents, or people who are, I don't know, they lost their parents, or they grew up in the street and, they're very traumatized. So they, extreme cases. Now, in extreme cases, of course, the wound is much deeper. But it's not necessarily only for these cases. You could have had both of your parents in your house, in your home, taking care of you. If you think about it, that's a lovely home. That's a lovely, that child got so much love, etc. Now, the problem with this is that, again, as a child, you were perceiving the world through your eyes, through a child's eyes. Okay, you did not rationalize, you did not understand exactly what was going on with your parents because you were a child. So let's say that for some reason your parents had to leave you alone, for whatever reason. They had to leave you alone for some time. And you felt alone, you felt lonely, and you started crying, and your parents didn't come back for a while. That experience alone is being recorded in your memory, in your emotional memory, in your body memory, as abandonment, or as lonely, or as unloved, because my parents left me here abandoned. So it's not that as a child in that moment you were thinking this. It's not that as a baby, as a child, you were like, oh, my parents left me, so they don't love me. That means that they abandoned me and I feel abandoned. This is not how the child is responding. This is not how the child is thinking. The child is not thinking. This is something we really need to understand and go back to how a child is, to understand ourselves. Because we forgot that we were once kids, children, and babies. And because we forgot how is that like, then we stop feeling compassion and empathy for ourselves. This is the most important part of this work. So the child or the baby did not think those things. He or she was just feeling those things. He or she was just feeling the emotions. So those emotions were too strong for that child. And add other things. I'm not just saying only that, but other things too. Because also think about a child or a baby, a newborn baby into the world. There's a lot of input. There's a lot of input in this earth, in this world, for a newborn child. That baby was inside the mother in peace, technically in peace, although even inside the mother, he or she is feeling everything the mother is feeling. Okay. But let's say that that child was happy in that cocoon and protected. And now coming out into the world, into a traumatized world. So I'm not talking only about the actions in the world, I'm talking about the energy in the world. When we came into this world, the energy in the world and the trauma in the world was so extreme. And it's still extreme. It's just that now we are actually transmuting it and clearing it out. That's what's happening right now in the world. We are clearing out all that past and all those wounds and all those traumas. So justice is coming out in the collective history of the world with all the subjects and all the topics that have been coming out in general, in the same way it's coming out in our individual life, because our individual life is what makes up the collective. Remember that. The collective is individuals together. So for us to change the collective, we need to work in the individual. The individuals create a collective. It's not the other way around. And this is the beginning of it. Okay. Now, next, why is so important? Part of it that I already answered. Why is so important? For the work that you're doing, for your self-love, your self-growth, your awakening journey. So self-growth and self-love go hand in hand, awakening go hand in hand. It's all packed up together. If I don't do inner child healing, I cannot grow. I cannot grow. You're gonna be stuck. You're gonna be stuck in your childhood, literally, because the example of these traumas or wounds being stuck in your emotional body and in your physical body also is, for example, as an adult, you have a discussion with someone, or maybe a friend tells you, no, they're not coming to your gathering or whatever. And you really wanted that friend there, etc. And then this feeling of rejection comes. Or if you want to make it, more specific for a lot of people, the romantic feeling when they like someone romantically and somebody tells them no, that's the biggest pain, or one of the biggest pains for some reason. It has a lot to do with social conditioning, but that's the way it is. So that's when a person will feel rejected. But it can also be with a friend, it can also be with your parents, and you are an older person and then you still feel rejected by your parents, you still feel you're not being approved by your parents, you're still trying to get approval from your parents. This is a huge example, your parents. And you still don't feel accepted by your parents. All these are signs of unhealed inner child, because that inner child is still feeling insecure. That inner child is still feeling that it's not getting the love and attention that it needs. Now, for that growth to happen, we have to go back and look at these wounds. We have to go back to go forward. We cannot keep going forward, ignoring the past. That's not the way that we grow. We don't grow by ignoring the past and just moving forward blindly. because you're just making the same mistakes, because you're just carrying all the wounds with you anyways, and you keep behaving the same way. That's not growth, and that's not consciousness. So growth and consciousness comes from understanding your past and making peace with your past and learning from your past. And this includes your childhood experiences. All those hurts from your childhood, since you were in the belly of your mom, from there on. Now, the many techniques, hypnotherapy is one of those great techniques to go back into childhood and even when you were being born, and anything that was stored there when you were being born, or the way that you came into this world, all those things are stored there in your subconscious, in your emotional body, in your emotional memory. Okay, you can get there with other techniques also. I'm just naming one of the techniques that I know very well, and they work very well for this. So whatever technique you choose for yourself to go back and heal your childhood, as long as it works, that's fine. It's not about the technique, it's about if it works or if it doesn't work for you. So you have to find that technique that works for you. And the important thing is to get to those wounds and those traumas and those hurts from childhood. And then look at them. Look at your inner child. Look at you as a child, as a baby. Just bring compassion and understanding into that experience, whatever experience, specific situation, specific relationship, especially with your parents. The healing relationship with your inner child, with your parents is, is the main one. Whether your parents are alive or not, whether you met your parents or not when you were growing up, even like that, you can go back and do that inner child healing. Because let's say that you lost one of your parents when you were a child, or you never met one of your parents when you were a child. That is a wound in itself. That's already a wound for that child, because that child cannot rationalize, cannot understand with a mature mind or consciousness that, oh, I don't have a father, I don't have a mother. Why is he not here? Why is she not here? Oh, I'm abandoned. I'm not loved. That's what the child comes to as a conclusion. It comes to that conclusion in that moment that feels that hurt, and it just stays there stored. So that is gonna paint all your experiences as you keep growing up. And because you keep growing up without acknowledging these wounds, because you can't, you just living your life, you're just growing up and trying to cope with a world that is insane and traumatized. So as you keep going, you keep getting more traumas and more traumas and more traumas and more hurts. So when you get to a certain point in your adulthood, then when you choose to start healing, when you choose to change your life for better, when you realize I can't keep living this way, I can't keep having these type of relationships and these patterns and the same over and over and over again, then you realize, okay, I need to change something, I need to do something. So when you do that, when you start in this journey of healing or awakening or growth or self-love, or whatever you want to call it, just to take care of yourself and change your life for better, then you start looking at these things. And that's how you start changing, actually changing the way you treat yourself, first of all. First of all, you need to change the way you treat yourself. And this inner child healing and this communication and relationship that you start building with your inner child is going to help you so much to change the way that you treat yourself. So in one of the specifics that I can tell you on how you can see the change? Or how can you see in the outer world how is shown when you start doing this type of work? How is shown is, for example, when you make a mistake, when you're learning something new and you make a mistake, how are you treating yourself? How much compassion you have for yourself? How much patience you have for yourself? And the other big one is your critical mind. So your critical mind now was built, was created when you were very young. And that critical mind, or the critic or the judge that you have in your mind, was created and was built by all the authority figures that you had growing up. So first of all, your primary caregivers, right? Either your parents or grandparents or anyone who was really there raising you or educating you. Those are the primary ones. So as a child, you see them as authority figures. So these authority figures were there to teach you in a way, or to protect you, or to take care of you, or to raise you, to educate you, etc. Right? That was their role. Now, back then, let's say this was a few years ago, right? Because if you are listening to this, you're an adult, and probably you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s or maybe 60s. So that was a few years ago. And the educational, the information, the consciousness was different. Okay, the way that we were raised was different. The way that they were raised was different. They were coming from another time, so they just learned what their parents did to them, and so they passed that on to us. Okay, automatic. Now, I'm not saying anything is wrong, bad, or right, or it should have been, or whatever. I'm not talking about any of that. What I'm saying is that that's the way it was. However you were raised, that's the way that you were raised. We need to look at the facts, and we need to look at the way that we were raised and how those authority figures used to teach us certain things or protect us in their own way. And that was their own way to love us and protect us, okay? You need to understand that. That was their own way because that's the way they learned. They did not know what they were doing. They literally did not know, okay? And even today, when you're a parent, sometimes you don't know what the hell you're doing. And that's okay because, well, it's something new, all right? Now, when you grow up, then it's your responsibility to heal yourself. So we can't keep blaming our parents forever. You can blame your parents for a certain time, and that's part of the process. But then at some point, you have to stop. You have to stop and take full responsibility for your own wounding and let go of your parents, because that's the only way that you really are going to grow and become your own loving, supporting, accepting parent. For you to become that parent, you have to let go of your parents. And for you to let go of your parents, you need to forgive. Now, the other part of the inner child healing, which is very important, is that at some point, we end up forgiving those whoever caused us pain, or whoever hurt us, or whoever break our heart when we're growing up. We need to forgive those situations and people in the past to be able to move forward. Resentment is one of the things that keep people stuck. They cannot move forward if you keep resentment in your heart. For you to free yourself, you need to forgive. For you to grow, you need to forgive. Now, the forgiveness, the real forgiveness, comes from understanding. Real forgiveness comes from understanding.